So in this episode, we're going to add the beadboard effect to the back panel, as well as dado the back and side panels, and then we'll start to see the upper cabinet take shape. Let's get started. In the drawing, you may have noticed that the back panel of that cabinet looks like beadboard. Well, all I've got is just standard 3/4 inch birch plywood. So I purchased a beadboard bit, and I'll use that to actually make some faux beads in the panel itself. It's very simple to do with the Festool System. I'm just using the OF1010 router. I've got my 2 rails that are already connected, and then with the router I've got a guide stop that will actually ride along the guide rail and connect to the router to give me a perfectly straight pattern that I want to achieve. So as far as the layout of the beads, I did it every 6 inches. You could do whatever you want. It's totally up to you. So to simplify the process, I'm just going to clamp the guide rail so it's exactly 1 inch away from the center line of my bead. Then all I have to do is just line up the center line of my router to that, lock those down. Now for each one that I move it over, it's going to be exactly the same. Anytime I'm doing any routing with a profile bit, I'll always do a sample piece, just so I can practice on a scrap piece before I actually dial it in on my finished piece. Once I've got it dialed in, I've got my depth set, I can make my first pass. So because of the birch plywood that I'm using, it's not a Baltic birch. After my first pass, some of the fibers of the plywood are still showing through. So with the Festool routers, what I can do is adjust my micro adjust down a couple tenths of a millimeter and just clean up that pass and make a nice smooth joint. So with the first one done, it's just a matter of moving it down, 1 inch passed. I'll clamp the other end and bring this back to the original first pass depth and do it all over again. So for this last groove, if I do the same process that I've been doing thus far, when I go to move it an inch past that pencil line, I run out of room to clamp it down to my material. So, easy fix is just spin the guide rail around and go an inch the other direction. And it'll be the same exact layout. So once I've got all these grooves routed in here, you can see there's some rough spots that are still left behind. That's more due to the quality of the plywood. To be honest with you, I couldn't get Baltic birch plywood during this time, so I just got with the cabinet grade plywood. And so I can just go back with one of our hand sanding blocks with a slight bevel on it and just clear up any of those rough spots that I might see. And once that's done, we can move on to the next step. I want to go ahead and also put a dado in the back panel for that upper shelf. I've already gone ahead and set up the 1400 router with the guide stop. If you want to see more about doing that, we've got plenty of videos to show you. Once I've got the guide stop set up and the placement of the router set up, next thing I do is set my depth. I get a lot of questions about how to set the depth on the 1400 or any of our routers really, but I'm going to show you on the 1400. It's very simple. First thing I want to do is just bottom it out. Once it's bottomed out, lock it into place. And then after you do that, you've got to zero everything out on the depth setting. So that's this rod right here. So I'm going to push that all the way down so it's touching one of the posts on the turret. Push this other lever down that goes up and down. Lock that into place, and now I'm zeroed out. Next, I need to determine how deep I want to go with my dado, and I know that's going to be 3/8 of an inch. So because I'm zeroed out, now all I have to do is just loosen that knob, raise this up, loosen that, and now there's a scale on the side. I could try and find exactly where 3/8 of an inch is. I don't trust my eyes. I get a spacer block. This is exactly 3/8 of an inch. There's a lot of different gauge blocks on the market. Follow the same process. Lock that into place, just like that. Now I know there's an exactly 3/8 of an inch gap right there. With the depth set on the router, next thing I need to do is figure out where I need to start and stop for my stop dados, because I don't want these dados to go all the way through so you can see them on the finished project. So to do that, I could try and line up and sight down where my router bit is. To me, that's just too difficult. So what I'm going to do is use one of our limit stops, one on each side of the router. To do that, it's pretty easy to set it up. On this little support foot, we've got a numerical scale on there. We've got 0 all the way up to 22 millimeters. So if I find 0 and put that on my line, I know the center of my bit is directly on the center of my line. Well, I don't want that to be like that because I want to be on the other side of my line with my complete router bit. That router bit's 18 millimeters. So if I go 9 millimeters on the other side of that line, that means the edge of my router bit is now going to start at my line going that way. Then all I have to do is just place my limit stop on the guide rail, lock it into place. Now the guide stop holds it in place. I'll do the same thing down there. Now I've got a start and stop point. So with everything set, I'm ready to start routing. So now with the dado in place, I can just use a scrap piece of wood for a test fit. This is the same material I'm going to be using for the shelf. Fits nice and snug, not too loose. If it was too tight, I could utilize this green dial right here, which is the micro adjust to move the router in and out. Each one of those marks is 1/10 of a millimeter. So that could give me just a little bit more so that piece would slide in there even easier. Last two things I need to do is grab a piece of sandpaper and take care of these fibers that are left behind, then also get a nice sharp chisel and square off these rounded edges. So the next thing I'm going to do is the same process on the side panels for that upper cabinet, just like I did on the back panel. I've gone ahead and taken off the limit stops because this is going to be a through dado. I've just clamped these two boards together so now I can do one long pass and finish dados in both of them at the same time. I've kept the settings for the guide stop and the router the same as on the back panel, so now we're ready to make a dado. So now that we've got the side panels and the back panel of that upper cabinet all dadoed, I'm going to start working on the drawers. For my drawers, I use 3/4 inch stock for the sides and the front and back, and then the bottom is going to be actually a 1/2 inch material. I want these drawers to be nice and durable. There's a couple different ways you can do the dado for the 1/2 inch stock on the bottom. You could use our 1010, 1400, or 2200 router handheld with an edge guide and do that just as easy. I've got a CMS here, so I'm going to go ahead and use the CMS. Because I have such a small shop, what I tend to do is I build rolling carts for a lot of my tools. I've got the rolling MFT stand. I built a rolling cart for the CMS. So when the CMS sits on top of it, it's the same height as the MFT, my MFT rolling stand, and also my countertops. If you want to learn more about calibrating and setting up the CMS, check out some more of those videos on our YouTube channel. So once everything's adjusted correctly, I got everything locked down, I go ahead and turn it on and run all my dados. So with the dados done, we can move on to the exciting part of getting it assembled. To continue the build, click here or check this out, and don't forget to subscribe.